Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really digging in something quite fundamental. We're looking at the subconscious mind.
That's right. We're using a specific piece of writing you shared, chapter 12, from this source as our guide.
Exactly. The mission here is to take this perspective, this particular view, and really pull out the core ideas. What does this source say the subconscious is? How might it work?
And it's important to frame it, like you said, as this source's perspective. It's not necessarily the final word scientifically, but it's a fascinating framework to explore.
Definitely. And the hook, I think, is why this source thinks it matters so much. It suggests the subconscious is this huge filing cabinet for thoughts.
Everything.
Yeah, and the key to turning desires into reality, maybe even a connection to something bigger. It calls it infinite intelligence. That's quite a claim.
It is. So let's unpack that. Where should we start? Maybe with the source's basic definition.
Good idea. How does it actually define the subconscious?
Okay, so it describes it as a field of consciousness. Think of it like a receiver.
A receiver.
Yeah, it takes in and, crucially, records every single thought impulse that reaches your objective mind through the senses.
Every single one. No filter.
Apparently not, according to this source. It classifies and records everything. Doesn't matter if it's positive, negative, constructive, destructive. It all goes in the file.
Wow. Okay, so it's like this constant input stream 204/7.
Exactly. It works day and night. It never really stops.
But it's not just passive storage, is it? The source says it acts on things.
That's the key function highlighted here. It acts first on what the source calls dominating desires, especially those that are mixed with strong emotional feeling.
Emotion.
Yes, and it specifically calls out faith as a very powerful emotional driver that the subconscious responds to.
So it prioritizes thoughts based on the emotional charge, particularly faith. Interesting. And there's a voluntary part too, right? You can choose to influence it.
The source claims you can voluntarily plant specific plans, thoughts, purposes into your subconscious.
With the aim of
Wow.
having them become real.
Essentially, yes, to translate them into their physical or, say, monetary equivalent. And this ties directly back to other concepts in the source, like defining your desires clearly.
Right, giving it clear instructions almost.
Exactly. And this is where the source makes probably its most significant claim.
Which is?
That the subconscious mind is the actual connecting link. The bridge, if you will.
The bridge between?
Between the finite mind of man, our everyday consciousness, and what the source terms infinite intelligence.
Okay, that is a big idea, the intermediary.
It's presented as absolutely central. It's the medium, the channel, through which you can potentially draw upon forces from this larger intelligence.
And it goes even further on prayer, doesn't it?
It does. It makes the really bold statement that the subconscious is the sole medium through which prayer can be transmitted to whatever source is capable of answering prayer.
That assigns it a massive role. It's almost like the modem to the divine internet in this view.
Yeah, that's one way to think about it. And the source itself seems aware of how huge this sounds.
Yeah, I noticed that. It talks about how little we actually know, calling our knowledge pitifully limited.
Right, and that the idea of it being this communication medium is almost paralyzing to reason.
Yeah.
There's a sense of awe there.
Which kind of makes sense if you're proposing something that profound. So understanding this link helps explain why the source stresses things like desire and planning so much.
Precisely. If the subconscious is the transmitter, you need to give it a clear, strong signal to send. That's where well-defined desires and plans come in.
Okay, so if it's this powerful link and it runs constantly, how do you voluntarily influence it? How do you make sure you're sending the signals you want to send?
The source is very specific here. It says the only way to voluntarily direct it is through habit.
Habit?
Yes, developing habits based on the principles of faith and what it calls autosuggestion, basically, self-suggestion.
So it's not a magic button you press once.
Definitely not. It stresses patience and persistence. You need time to really build that deep faith, that conviction. Mastery takes time. Don't expect it to work perfectly on the first try.
And because it's always running, you can't just ignore it, right? If you're not actively putting in good stuff.
Then it feeds on whatever's coming in. And that includes, fear, thoughts of poverty, negativity, all of that. Those impulses are always reaching it, whether you intend them to or not.
That's a bit daunting. Your mental background noise matters a lot.
It's a crucial point in this framework. What you allow to dominate your conscious mind directly feeds the subconscious. So the goal, as presented here,
Is to get to a place where you're consistently feeding it positive impulses,
yeah,
driven by your main desires.
exactly. You want to achieve the ability to influence it primarily through those positive, emotionally charged desires.
And if you manage that, what's the payoff?
The source suggests that when you achieve that, you essentially hold the key. You can unlock and control the access, shaping the blueprint. Undesirable thoughts then can't really get a foothold or influence the outcome.
Blueprint. That leads to another core idea in this source, doesn't it? About thoughts themselves.
Yes, the idea that everything humans create, literally everything, starts as a thought impulse.
You can't build it if you haven't thought it first.
Absolutely. Thought is the origin point.
Mm.
And imagination is presented as the workshop.
The workshop.
Yeah, where you assemble those raw thought impulses into plans, into structures. If your imagination is under control, you can use it purposefully to design plans that lead to success.
Okay, so thought is the seed, imagination is the design phase. How does that get into the subconscious then?
Well, the source provides a specific process for voluntary input. It says thoughts intended for transmutation, for becoming real, must pass through the imagination.
Okay.
And they have to be mixed with faith,
Mixed with faith. How does that happen?
through the imagination. The source claims that the actual mixing of faith with a plan or purpose happens only within the faculty of imagination.
So it's a kind of recipe. Thought plus imagination, infused with faith, subconscious imprint.
That seems to be the formula presented. And it implies you need to bring all the principles the source discusses, desire, faith, autosuggestion, imagination, etc., together. They have to work in concert for this voluntary control to function.
It's an integrated system. I think there was a quote in there too about thoughts being things.
Yes, from Ella Wheeler Wilcox. It emphasizes the power and reality of thoughts. You never can tell what a thought will do in bringing you hate or love. For thoughts are things, and their airy wings are swifter than carrier doves. It ends, whatever went out from your mind.
Thoughts are things. It's memorable. What's the implication for the subconscious in this view?
It means the thoughts you send out also plant themselves deeply in your own subconscious.
So they form the pattern.
Exactly. They act like a magnet or a blueprint or a pattern that the subconscious then uses as its guide when it translates those thoughts into physical reality. We keep coming back to this. Material reality starts as thought energy.
Okay, this is fascinating. And it seems like the type of thought, or rather its quality, is really important. Which brings us to emotion, right?
Absolutely critical, according to the source. It argues and says there's significant evidence for this, that the subconscious is way more influenced by thoughts mixed with feeling or emotion than by pure, cold reason.
More than reason. It actually says only emotionalized thoughts have an action influence.
That's the claim. Emotion isn't just a booster. It's presented as the essential ingredient for action.
Like it won't act without it.
Pretty much. The analogy used is yeast in bread.
Okay.
Emotion is the yeast. It's the excitation element. It takes a passive thought and makes it active, makes it something the subconscious can actually do something with. That's why emotional thoughts get priority over, purely logical ones from cold reason.
So to get the subconscious working on your desire, you absolutely have to speak its language. And that language is emotion, feeling.
You got it. You have to charge that thought, that plan, with emotional energy. And the source helpfully lists what it considers the major positive emotions to cultivate.
Right, there were 7 positives.
Yes. Desire, faith, love, sex, which it often links to creative energy, enthusiasm, romance, and hope.
Those are the constructive ones you want to harness.
It calls them the most powerful, the ones used most in creative efforts. And it suggests mastering them through use helps you command the negatives.
And the negatives, the ones to avoid.
Also 7 major ones listed: fear, jealousy, hatred, revenge, greed, superstition, and anger.
That's quite the list. And the source is really clear that you can't have both sets running the show at once, right?
Extremely clear. Positive and negative emotions cannot occupy the mind at the same time. One has to dominate.
And it puts the responsibility squarely on us.
Directly on you. It says it's your responsibility to make sure the positive emotions are the ones in charge. And the way to do that is through the law of habit, consciously choosing and cultivating the positives until they become automatic.
Okay, so if emotion is the key and positives fuel constructive action, then it makes sense that fear would be especially damaging.
Hugely damaging in this model. The source states point blank that just having fear present in your conscious mind is enough to wreck any chance of getting constructive help from the subconscious.
It just blocks.
Acts as a complete block. Yeah.
It uses prayer as an example here, too, which is interesting.
It does. It notes how people often pray only when desperate, when everything else has failed.
And they pray full of fear and doubt.
Exactly. So, because fear and doubt are dominating their minds at that moment, those are the emotions the subconscious picks up and transmits. Infinite intelligence in this view responds to the feeling, not just the words.
So if you're praying, please let this work, but feeling, this probably won't work.
Then the underlying fear is what gets sent, making the prayer ineffective according to this source. It suggests successful prayer requires a specific state of mind.
One free of fear,
Yeah.
presumably filled with faith.
That's the implication, a state aligned with positive emotion. The source even looks ahead, predicting a future where prayer is taught more scientifically, without fear, helping people reach their true status.
That connection again. And it tries to explain that connection with another analogy, the radio one.
Yeah, it compares communication with infinite intelligence to how radio works.
How so?
Well, with radio, sound waves, which are relatively low vibration, get stepped up to a much higher frequency, right?
Right.
Radio waves.
So they can travel through the air, the ether.
Exactly. Undetectable by our ears directly. Then the radio receiver steps them down again so we can hear the sound.
Okay, I follow. So the subconscious is.
The subconscious is the intermediary station in this analogy. It takes our thoughts, our prayers, which are like the original sound waves, and translates them, steps them up into spiritual vibrations.
Spiritual vibration. How?
Through faith. Faith is presented as the only known way to give a thought that spiritual nature, that higher frequency, that infinite intelligence can apparently recognize and receive.
So the subconscious, fueled by faith, transforms the thought vibration.
Yes, it sends the message, and then it receives the answer back, often as a plan or an idea that drops into your conscious mind.
Meaning just saying the words isn't enough. You need that transformation process.
That's the core of the analogy. Mere words won't do it. It needs the subconscious and faith.
Is there a cost to this communication?
Not in money, the source says. No toll gates. But there's a cost in terms of personal effort. Patience, faith, persistence, understanding, and crucially, a sincere desire.
Those internal qualities are the currency.
Seems so. And it has to be you. You have to do it yourself. The source is quite dismissive of paid prayers or trying to get someone else to do it for you. It's your mind, your subconscious, your connection.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. The source presents the subconscious mind as this incredibly powerful, constantly operating mechanism.
And a vital link to something more.
Right, but influencing it isn't passive. You can't just let it run wild.
Not if you want specific results. It requires deliberate conscious effort. Managing your dominant emotions is key, actively building up the positives like faith and desire.
And actively shutting down the negatives,
Yeah.
especially fear.
Absolutely. And using your imagination consciously. That's the workshop where you combine your thoughts and plans with that necessary emotion, that faith, before you hand them over to the subconscious.
So it's about actively directing your inner world, thoughts, feelings, imagination to create the blueprint you want.
That's the essence of it, yes. Shaping that internal blueprint, which, this source argues, ultimately dictates your external results. It's a very active, participatory model of how our minds might work.
It certainly gives you a lot to think about regarding your own mental habits. Thanks for walking us through this source's perspective.
Glad to. It's a complex framework, but definitely provocative.
Indeed. So here's a final thought for you, our listeners, based on what we've discussed from this writing. If every single thing we create starts as a thought, and if this source is right that only emotionalized thoughts, thoughts mixed with feeling, are the ones that truly impress that blueprint onto the subconscious, well, what does that imply about the everyday thoughts and feelings you allow yourself to dwell on? What kind of blueprint are you building, maybe without even realizing it?